Some people debate whether religions should take part in the everyday shenanigans of life, should take part in politics and the moral welfare of the people. I've discussed this a little bit already on this channel, but this video is called Big Brexit Bash, Anarchy in the in the UK. And of course, by the end of this weekend, this video will be irrelevant. And personally, I think that YouTube management should find a way of deleting out-of-date videos because they're just using server space, and server space costs money. And if all these loads of videos are out of date, especially on political things, especially on Brexit, like you could make a video literally one day and it'd be out of date the next day. So I wonder whether, it's a good idea for by some means or other, that YouTube management does get rid of all the out-of-date videos. Of course, it depends what you define as out of date, I suppose, really. Anyway, the big Brexit bash and anarchy in the UK. I don't know. This is a bit of a theoretical rant, really, because society is incredibly complex, and the UK society, being multinational, multi-ethnic, pluralistic, humanist and secularist, is incredibly complex, and all statements tend to sort of go down in the quicksand of complexity, if you know what I mean. So you kind of make a simplistic statement and it's dissolved into the complexity as soon as you've made it. And that's one of the problems, I think, with sociology as a discipline. It's just so generalized, basically, and so non-empirical, which is why sociology, I've always held sociology in suspicion. Not exactly contempt, because it's quite fun, but certainly in suspicion that you can get anything concrete out of it. Anyway, what do I mean by the big Brexit bash? Well, all this week, our present Prime Minister, Mr. Boris Johnson, has been trundling around the place and ringing people up and having coffee with people that he doesn't like, and basically asking them a simple question. Do you want Jeremy Corbyn, a self-confessed Marxist, to run the country, or do you want Nigel Farage in charge? And of course, they probably look at him over their cups of coffee and say, "Whoa, what do you mean by that?" And he says, "Well, at the present moment, Britain is technically an anarchist state, and we're actually administering an anarchist state, and there's no crusties around, there's no hippies or anything. We are the crusties and we are the hippies." And they kind of look at him again and say, "Whoa, what do you mean by that?" And it's perfectly simple, though, as Nigel Farage has in fact pointed out. He pointed this out, I think, 2 years ago. The executive branch of government is actually not in charge anymore, and everything to do with Brexit, at least, and everything related to Brexit, at least, is being sort of funneled through this parliament, basically, and and that's not the way that British democracy actually works. And I'll tell you why it doesn't work. Because if there is no elected executive government in charge, then that means that the government is not in charge, but the state is in charge. The bureaucrats, the security forces, the people with the rule books, the people that already have a rule book tucked under their arms. These are the people that actually rule, that actually govern. It's the same as the EU, in fact, which is why Britain wants to leave the EU. Is the EU is not a democratic institution at all. It has a load of talking committees and parliamentary committees and that, which actually do nothing at all. The people that actually rule the EU are the bureaucrats and the oligarchs, and paid for, of course, by the corporations. And this, of course, is the main argument that is used for Britain to leave this non-democratic institution. Um, because Britain is a funny country, and Britain cares a lot about freedom and democracy, whereas perhaps other countries are more pragmatic about it, and especially non-EU countries, I think, and countries in Asia and Africa are very much more pragmatic and just say, well, democracy doesn't work in our country, so we're just not going to bother worrying about it. But why? This is the problem. I mean, if you think about the Soviet Union in 1917, the Soviet Union was taken over by a whole sort of committees of Soviet committees of administrators who weren't actually administrators, they were just talking shops. And then what happened was that these talking shops could get nothing done. So that left the administration of this vast country to the military. And then Joseph Stalin took over and completed the circle, as it were, and just took over the running of the country because these anarchist Soviets, anarchist communes, couldn't decide on the colour of the paper that they would use to write down the minutes on. Do you know what I mean? So it was absolutely appalling. And this is what we have here. We have a parliament in the UK which has no power, but it's like a many-headed hydra. And they're all going in different directions, and they're all got different agendas, and they're all hoping for different outcomes, and they're all lobbying each other and having lobbyists lobby them, and it's just chaos, you know. But because the parliament is so strong, it means that this chaos, this anarchist sort of commune of MPs running the country or trying to run the country, can't do a very good job, which means, you see, that de facto the state, the bureaucratic machinery of Britain, is in fact running the country and not the executive arm of the elected government. And this is a very serious thing, actually, and potentially, although I think in practice it doesn't really matter that much, because people are not actually going to get their muskets and shots and cannon out and go to war in the streets about it. Most people in Britain don't even know they're living in an anarchist state, and would be shocked if you told them that they were. But they probably would say, "Well, I can't do anything about that anyway." Being that apathy is one of the biggest things in Britain today, and generally speaking, nobody would take responsibility to do anything or commit to anything anymore. It seems to me. So really, it almost. But that's almost a fail-safe in this. If this had happened 20 years, well, not 20 years, 100 years ago, you might have a serious rebellion or revolutionary situation on your hands. But I think as it is in Britain, everybody is just too busy smoking hash and doing ease to really give a damn. You know what I mean? Which is probably just as well. But it can't go on. I think that Boris Johnson is right. You'd either have to have Labour Party elected with a 100-seat majority, or Nigel Farage storming in with his Brexit party and having a landslide victory on the grounds that people are sick of political pundits and they're sick of professional politicians feathering their own nests, and liberals and people that don't know what they're doing generally and don't know what they're saying anymore. And they want sort of ordinary people in charge of government, who are not taking bribes and are not you can't blackmail them or even threaten to kill them. That they're ordinary people that sort of walked in the shoes of the ordinary people for a long time before they decided to do something about it and join the political furore. So that's basically you're likely to get Nigel Farage in charge. The Tory party and the Labour Party are looking down at the barrels of extinction. I mean, Extinction Rebellion, they're nothing. Extinction Rebellion is going on right now, and the Brexit Party actually is the party of the extinction of Labour and Conservative parties, in fact. So Boris Johnson and the Conservatives have got everything to live for and everything to fight for, actually, on this particular day, on the Saturday. But all week, he's been saying to people, do you want Nigel Farage in charge, or do you want the self-styled Marxist Jeremy Corbyn in charge? If you don't give me executive power back. So basically, this deal that's got to go through Parliament today, it's not about well, it is about Brexit, obviously, but the supplementary issue is about giving executive power back to a government that has been elected constitutionally. You see, that's what it's really about, because you can't have this ongoing situation of Parliament being in charge of government. It doesn't work. It could lead to, I don't know, military takeover or something. It could lead to serious civil unrest. It could lead to a lot of nasty things, which people would wander into, not necessarily kind of, in a conspiratorial kind of way, but people would just, find themselves, in the streets opposite somebody that they don't like or that they think they don't like, and fists might be thrown. You know what I mean? But of course, unlike 1848, people haven't got muskets and swords and cannon and shot. They're not going to go home and get rifles out because they don't have any rifles. This isn't the USA, right? Basically, I'm sure that this is a theoretical problem. But if it was ongoing, if the executive branch of elected government cannot govern, which is Nigel Farage, his central point on this, then that, for the medium and long term, is not good. It's okay, perhaps, for emergencies like this, and where the country is at a crossroads or something, or perceives itself at a crossroads, which I don't think it actually is at any crossroads at all, really, but it thinks it is in a sort of neurotic kind of way. And that's when you need to have executive government in charge, and not Parliament. So obviously, Parliament has got too big for its boots, like it did before the English Civil War with Charles I. And Charles I was too big for his boots, of course, and his advisors were too big for their boots. Society is all about balance, you see, really. You've got to strike the balance, a dynamic balance, sure. People swing from one opinion to another, but overall, you've got to have a balance, and this situation is now an unbalanced situation, which, even if you hate Boris Johnson to his very bones, you've got to admit that somehow or somewhere Boris Johnson has got to succeed today, or if not today, then certainly next week. But this video will be out of date by tomorrow, so I don't know why I made it even.